Led Zeppelin are arguably one of the most influential hard rock bands of all time. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into their story. This is the history of Led Zeppelin. Our story begins in 1966 when Jimmy Page, currently a session guitarist, joined the blues rock band called the Yardbirds. Despite being known as a guitar prodigy, Page began as a bassist for the band, but soon switched to lead guitar alongside Jeff Beck. Although Beck was a prominent member of the band, he departed in October of 1966. Their first album with Page, Little Games, came in 1967 and was promptly toured around the US. Subsequent touring in 1968 proved to be an exhausting endeavour for the band, resulting in the departure of their vocalist and drummer. Plans to reforge the group into some sort of supergroup with members of The Who proved unsuccessful, and the band played their final gig in July of 1968. Other concerts were penciled in, however, and so a vocalist would be required. Robert Plant, who was singer for the Band of Joy at the time, promptly joined the band and even enlisted a previous drummer of his, John Bonham. Their bassist dropped out, leaving John Paul Jones to fill the spot, completing the legendary lineup. Their initial tour, still under the Yardbirds name, proved massively successful. The band really clicked well, proving that something promising had been born. In September of 1968, they began recording their first album, although a cease and desist letter ended up at their doorstep, however, due to their use of the Yardbirds' name. This caused them to change their name to the now legendary Led Zeppelin. A contract was signed with Atlantic Records in November, a company that had recently taken interest in progressive rock acts. Although still being billed as the new Yardbirds, they toured extensively until the end of the year. Their debut album, Led Zeppelin, would follow in 1969 and peaked at number 10 on the Billboard charts. The album features an interesting mix of psychedelia and blues, with that classic Led Zeppelin folk inspiration blended in. 4 US and UK concert tours would follow, marking a steep upturn in their popularity. During this time, they also released their second album, aptly titled Led Zeppelin 2. This skyrocketed to number 1 in the US and UK charts. This album was essentially a continuation of the last, featuring many of the same musical styles. Despite being very pro-album, the single Whole Lotta Love was released without the band's consent, selling over 1 million copies. Continuing the naming convention of their last album, Led Zeppelin 3 released after a quiet set of recording sessions in a remote cottage in Wales. This resulted in an album that really honed in on those folk and Celtic influences seen on their previous 2 albums. The critics were dubious of this choice, but the band didn't care and steamrolled forward, gaining massive popularity as a result. Their progressive roots spread further when they took to the stage in 1970 in flamboyant and elaborate clothing. The band became an icon of eccentricity, with a private jet called the Starship, periods where they would rent out huge sections of hotels, and even points where they were banned from such places for life. They gained a bit of a reputation for their wanton destruction, but it furthered their rock and roll aura. Led Zeppelin 4, arguably one of their most iconic albums, released in 1971. It was meant to be an understated one, to stick a middle finger to the press. It's one of the biggest albums in history now, having sold 37 million copies. The track, Stairway to Heaven, despite never being a single, became one of the most requested songs on American rock radio that year, and obviously has a very big reputation nowadays. The band moved a step aside in 1973, when they released the experimental Houses of the Holy album. This one features more synthesizers than ever, alongside a mellotron. Never able to avoid controversy, the album cover was the talk of many with its depiction of new children. This album, like their previous, topped the charts worldwide. Subsequent tours smashed through attendance records set by the likes of the Beatles. This extreme touring came to an end in 1974 when the band broke their streak to launch their own record label, Swan Song, something that would bring them success whilst the band was together. They reunited in 1975 to release the album Physical Graffiti with their new label. 8 of the 15 songs in the album were famously recorded at Headley Grange only a year prior. The album was massive and seen as a sensible bid for artistic respectability, one that worked. They were deemed the largest band in the world. It certainly seemed the case after they played 5 sold-out nights at Earl's Court Arena in May of that year. However, a tragic car accident including Plant and his wife meant that their 1975 tour was promptly put on hold. The band retreated to the Channel Island of Jersey before eventually returning to California to record their next album, Present. The band steered toward a more straightforward rock and roll approach with this one, and despite sales, it received somewhat mixed reviews. Their life of debauchery may have caught up with them, with rumours of drug use and excess swirling. Touring was still delayed, and so the band released the film The Song Remains the Same and the accompanying soundtrack album to lukewarm reception. Subsequent tours in North America would recapture some of the lost attention, but the tour was beset with problems, with some gigs filled with rioters and another cut short by a thunderstorm. Things were looking dire for the band, and this downward trend continued when Plant's 5-year-old son passed away from a stomach virus. The tour was cancelled and their future was unclear. Another somewhat lukewarm album came with In Through the Outdoor. Despite this, subsequent touring did seem to capture a larger audience. During one of their gigs, however, Bonham collapsed on stage and was quickly rushed to hospital. Rumours of their excessive usage swirled, but the band tried to quell this the best they could. These rumours would prove true when Bonham passed in his sleep after taking a cocktail of anxiety medication, which may have mixed with the alcohol in his system. Rumours of a replacement drummer swirled after this tragic event, but no such member would arrive, and the band would eventually divide, unable to continue following Bonham's passing. The R&B-driven project The Honey Drippers would form in 1981, including Page, Plant, Jeff Beck and Nile Rodgers. They went on to release their only album in 1984. I've discussed previously how Live Aid brought Queen back into the limelight, but this incredible concert did little to help the band at the time. Plant's vocals were hoarse and Page's performance was an atrocity. The usual box sets, concert DVDs and compilations would follow, but the band would reunite for a tribute concert with Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, on drums. A full reunion would not come, as Plant fulfilled his touring commitments with Alison Krauss. Unquestionably one of the largest bands in the world, Led Zeppelin maintains an enduring legacy despite their controversial personal history. They're a mainstay of rock and roll, and it's hard to ignore the absolute quality of their work. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this incredible band, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed. I've been Will, and thanks for watching.